confident that we're hearing more than one shooter, and that paints a bigger picture.
We have multiple gunmen. The acoustics are 100% clear. The witnesses a half mile away at other hotels saw people being shot, saw glass, saw shell casings, saw police taking out whoever it was shooting. And you can hear in the first few minutes that there's multiple firearms going off from different distances. There's cab driver footage that we're going to play. Now, why is this so important? Because it tells us the official story is not true. Now, mainstream media makes all these jokes, and that's why they don't have any viewers or listeners. And they say, oh, Jones claims he talks to Navy SEALs. He claims he talks to Delta Force people. He claims he talks to Green Berets. He claims he talked to the hostage rescue team. I don't claim anything. I have laid out the facts, and our history of having whistleblower, top-notch, top-shelf information is sterling. But it isn't about how we're right or how we're wrong. It's about the issue. And joining us, Craig Sawyer, doesn't like me talking about what he did in the Navy SEALs. He was a leader in SEAL Team 6, not the commander of the whole SEAL Team 6. He's got shows on History Channel, Discovery Channel. He's very, very highly respected. He's one of the top marksmen in the world. And he says clearly there's overlapping fire. It's not echoes. But we've got video where the cab driver hears off the distance, and it goes on. And then 30 seconds later, bam, 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 right above her because she's at Mandalay. And there's all these other countless videos. I watched just yesterday probably 30 minutes of different people's cell phone footage all over Vegas, downtown Vegas. I mean, it is, at one point you hear, I mean, it's just like 3 guns going. So I hadn't heard that yet. So it is just crazy. And the media goes, oh, Jones claims he has these people, when I've had some of them on the broadcast. So Craig's joining us in 30 minutes because this is so central and so important, because some can say, well, it's a diversion from the overall story of his Middle Eastern connections. I understand that it's not the central issue, but if you can prove this wrong, you can prove it all wrong. And I understand they're not trying to create a panic here, so that's why they're telling people this. Back in the 70s and stuff, when you had a lot of terror attacks, they wouldn't even hardly report them on the news. That's a tactic if you're not trying to use terror to freak people out and take their rights. Since the 90s and through that, they started using terror to take our rights. Some of it synthetic, some of it manufactured, some of it false flags, a lot of it real. They started hyping it up. But when the old policy was, you don't talk about it, you don't make a big deal about it, and you don't give who did it credit, because that's what they want is credit. And ISIS, a bunch of them, hundreds of them just gave up today. Thousands in the last week. There are only in a few cities left in the Middle East. I mean, they have been crushed by our military and Trump cleaning up Obama's mess. So I get you don't want to give them this big victory and just say, well, it's, we don't know who did it. But that's not the truth. And we're not running wartime propaganda here in America. And the reason I wanted to get him back on today is they've had the Washington Post, the New York Times, and literally hundreds of other publications come out and say, Jones says he has all these military sources that say they clearly hear multiple shots. He's making it up. Even though I've had Craig on as an expert, and I've had other military people on, and I've also talked to people that are in Delta Force, Green Beret, Army, other Navy SEALs, you name it. Some of them have been on the show before. But some of them are involved in this investigation, so they can't come on now. Craig isn't. He's also a federal officer, air marshal. And I'm not going to go over his whole bio, and I don't normally go over the whole bio, but the media plays these games. They go, Jones claims he has sources inside the hostage rescue team that say they found Islamic and Antifa paraphernalia. No, they called me and texted me Monday. The same folks told our reporters, you better get out of Oregon. The shooting's about to start, and 2 days later it happened. Our people got out. I mean, these are really good people who were on the ground and sources. But Craig's willing to come on and talk about it. Former team leader in SEAL Team 6, must be clear, didn't command SEAL Team 6, and he doesn't even want me to say that. But the point is, we have to say some of the bona fides, some of the curriculum vitae, so people know who we're talking to. This is the guy with the big Discovery Channel show and the History Channel shows, you know, Top Shots. You know, he's a top ballistics expert. He's saying he hears two different groups shooting. But after he said that on Tuesday, we have footage of cab drivers where you're cleared on echo, 45 seconds later, bam, 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 at Mandalay above them. That's what people report down the road as shell casings and guys shot by the police. So the police are being told not to say what happened, I guess not to create panic, and they don't want to give ISIS a victory, and I get that's the old policy until the 90s is don't talk about terrorism. You can't let them do this then and use it against the Second Amendment. Plus, I'm not under martial law, so I want the truth to come out. Now, Craig's got sources. He won't even get into them with me, but he said, yeah, you're in the right direction. But I have my other sources, and they're like dead on this guy was ISIS. He was getting money for his gambling, millions a year. They were trying to recruit Westerners, they said 2 years ago. He pledged allegiance 6 months ago. The White House has the video. We have that from White House sources, and I got to say, I love the president. I like the president, and he's. But I think this is wrong. But regardless, there are multiple shooters. Why is that important? We're going to go over some of the acoustics evidence in a minute because it shows the whole story is not true. Solomon, what do you think about the situation now in hindsight as we get more distance on this and as more comes out?
Well, Alex, I always look at the big picture when everyone gets confused and starts agonizing over the small details. I take a couple steps back and scan the horizon, if you will, and consider what the big picture may be. Who benefits from these mass shootings? Why do they keep happening? Why are they always liberal Democrats that do the shooting? Why are they always on psychotropic drugs? And why are those facts always ignored by the radicals on the left and the mainstream news media? Why is it always just about the gun control narrative immediately and ferociously? So I scratch my head. I'm like, okay, somebody benefits from this, and it certainly wasn't the shooter in this case. We can see if he was even, in fact, the shooter at all. Either they smoked him, after he shot everybody up, or he didn't even get to do that before they smoked him. So this case stinks to high heavens. There's a lot of things that don't match up with what the public's being told. I think one of the main things is those security the footage from the security cameras around Mandalay Bay. They're everywhere. You're not going to go anywhere in that hotel without being captured. So I understand as a federal criminal investigator, protecting the case and safeguarding that forensic evidence for the prosecutions that may and hopefully are coming. But at some point, those pieces of footage will be released to the public unless there's a big government cover-up. If there's a big government cover-up, those pieces of footage will go away. Nobody will ever see or hear from them. Bye-bye. And that's one of the things that's going to take time for me is just sit and watch and go, okay, are we ever going to get footage of that guy and anyone else going in and out of that hotel room, or is it going to be buried forever, or is it already even destroyed?
Well, sure. I mean, I got the call from the HRT and then the text saying, go ahead and talk about it now. That's real. And we've proven all our sources. But I know you've got a lot of sources, and you're very frustrated. You're actually sitting here. You've talked to some of the investigators. We can't get into that. And you know a lot more than you can say. And is it frustrating to just have to sit here and watch the mainstream narrative?
Well, it is. Again, we want to safeguard the investigation, but we don't want the American people disarmed to the delight of our enemies, to the glee of our globalist enemies who are after that as one of their main objectives. They need primarily two things. They need us divided, and they need us disarmed for them to have the level of tyrannical control that they're after. Shame on any American citizen by now that's not educated on Cloward Piven and how that strategy is utilized to break our economy. We were suffering under it in the last 8 years. It's one of the things that's got them so upset about Trump. Our economy's recovering, and he's going to ensure that we stop squandering.
And it is, and now they're going to raise interest rates, admittedly trying to kill it. They said we can never get to 3%. It's 3.1. We're going to go to break and come back and play some of these acoustics and play some of the video from cab drivers and others. It's totally clear. And I'm not a former Navy SEAL Team 6 leader and Marine previously, and History Channel shooting expert like you are, but I can hear bup, 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 well, and then 45 seconds later, it's not an echo. Bam, 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 right on top of it. I mean, we're going to play that coming up. This is ridiculously obvious, is it not?
It is. Now, I will get this caveat out there. It's very important to be accurate. Echoes are very confusing, and hearing anything through a microphone is confusing. One of my best friends is probably the foremost authority on not terminal wound ballistics, but the acoustics of these big cases. And he goes through, he's got all these huge computer programs, he analyzes everything. But having said all that, and acknowledging that it is confusing after the fact to listen to a series of gunshots with the echoes, I will say this, some things are beyond, I mean, it's apparent anyway, even though you're listening to the echoes, and even though you're listening it after the fact through a microphone that just does change that acoustic signature, it is still apparent that there's more than one shooter. So one of the key points you brought up, I think very accurately, is you hear something very muffled, very far away, and then all of a sudden, shortly thereafter, it's very loud, very distinct. That's a far engagement and then a close engagement. So unless somebody's got a time machine, there's no other way to
well, sure, and even at miles away, an echo would be a second apart. This is 30, 40 seconds before, pop, 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 and then she's at Mandalay Bay, the taxi driver, and it's right above her. I mean, he's right there shooting out of the window.
Yeah. And even if let's just speculate. Let's say if the first string of fire were fired through a suppressor, it would not sound that way. It sounds distinctly different.
You're right.
Even though it would sound muffled, the sound is not the same type.
Have they said there were suppressors, though? But I would agree. The only way it's not is this is a suppressor.
Yeah. Nobody said that I've heard, Alex, and it does not sound that way to me. I was just playing devil's advocate. Even if it were, it would not sound the way that it does.
Well, by the way, I mean, I've talked to a lot of guys that have been, a few of them at your level of expertise, there's not many. They say it's absolutely clear.
I feel confident that we're hearing more than one shooter.
And I've watched dozens of these. It's not just her. It's people a mile away at other hotels saying, yeah, there's glass everywhere, shell casings. They shot these men. And then the police jumped on top of us and told us to get out of there. And everybody's like huddling. And they're shooting footage inside the hotel saying the police just made us shelter in place in here. I mean, there's just hours of this. And these are real people. This isn't made up.